As a good anatomist, which is what describes my um, part of what describes my profession, anatomist, I like to know that when I talk about something that people have a good idea of what I'm talking about and they're not just imagining it, right? So I'm going to try and tie in menopause and mental health. But before I start, I would like to ask you, for example, how do you define, how do you, what do you think menopause is? So that we can talk about what's actually happening in the body, because it's not just a thing. So if you can, what's menopause?
Well, you grow up hearing people talk about the change. And I guess it is when um, your body um, stops. I don't know. You perhaps stop producing like eggs and you're no longer of childbearing age or ability. People talk about hot flashes. Um, so it is hormonal changes that happen in your body. I guess that's my definition.
I would say it is the cessation of the menstrual cycle, where, like my colleague said, that is no longer a child of childbearing age, and the body goes through several changes, and ladies do experience things in different ways. It is not one unique thing.
You can hold on to it so we can pass it around in the for later or now. You want to say something? That kind of covers it. So Sister Marcel talked about change of life. It's when you pass childbearing age, and you talked about the cessation of the menstrual cycle. Right. So the menstrual cycle is a big thing for women. It's a part of our life. For some people, it almost defines them. For some people, it controls their life. Do you know what is menarche? Menarche. Menarche. You have the mic.
Sorry, I think it's a word for menstruation.
Yeah. The menarche is the opposite of menopause. Menarche is when a woman or a girl starts menstruating. Right. So when you were born, all of us who are biological women, these days we have to talk about biological women and genetic women, etc., etc. All of us who are biological women, so we already asked what is menopause. So right, all of us who are women, at birth, we were born with something called primordial follicles. And we had about 1 to 2 million of them, which probably means we all had the potential to have 2 million children. No, but they actually start dying as soon as you're born. It's probably the part of you that starts dying earliest. So by the time you reach puberty, which for some people is 12, 11, 13, for some people 15 and a half, you just have half of those. And they get exhausted by the time you reach menopause. So you have no more follicles. And those follicles, they actually develop under the influence of hormones. So when our bodies get to a certain age, we have glands in our bodies that we call endocrine glands. And I don't know if you ever followed, I like to refer to Healing Moments, a flagship program. there was one month when we talked about communication. We talked about hormones, which are chemicals produced by some of the glands of the body, and they're able to have effects on tissues or organs or glands that are far away from them. In other words, there is no duct, there is no tube or pipe connecting those glands to the other tissues. So we have glands at the base of our brain. We have pituitary gland. We have adrenal glands. I don't have them here, but they sit on top of the kidneys. I don't know if you've heard about adrenaline. When you get excited or afraid. Those adrenal glands also produce what we call sex hormones. The estrogen in women, and for men, the testosterone and other androgens. So all our adrenal glands produce both sex hormones. But in males, the way their physiology is, their adrenal glands produce more androgens or testosterone, and so they develop their beards, etc., etc. And in females, we're supposed to produce more estrogen than testosterone. But all of us have a little testosterone, which is why some people have a little imbalance. So you might find girly boys, and that doesn't mean, I don't mean that they're gay at all. I just mean that they have a little more estrogen, so their bottom is a little rounder than the average. And there are some women who have narrower hips, and they're a little more hairy, so they will get some beard, etc., etc. All right, so at the menarche, what starts happening is that you start getting a release of a hormone from the brain, from the pituitary, called follicle-stimulating hormone. Let's go to the next slide. Let me see where I have that. Right, okay, so let's focus on the anatomy for a while, because as I said, I wanted you to have a good idea of what we're talking about. So when we talk about the follicles, they are in the ovaries. And the ovaries are all the way down here. So this kind of thing that looks like a pink crab is actually the uterus, and then we have a right and a left ovary. And they're all the way down here. Even though when we're pregnant, our uterus comes up to here and kind of brings up everything with it, but it actually is quite small. The uterus, in a woman who has not born a child, who doesn't have fibroids, is probably about this size. And the ovaries are like two little grapes, right? And they're on, thank you for the next picture. So they're all the way down here. This is vagina, which is, as you can see, when you compare it to the length of the uterus, it's probably about the same length, right? So we tend to think of the womb as a big thing because it has a baby, but it's very small. So the ovaries are here. And when we get to like the egg production, you will see that there is actually a tube. There's actually a tube, that takes the eggs into the uterus. Okay, so let's continue. Get to the next slide. Right, so that has a lot on it, but that describes the phases that the ovaries and the uterus goes through. So at menarche, when the girl starts menstruating, it's because the hormones, the follicle-stimulating hormone, which is produced, this one, FSH, which is produced by the pituitary, has started acting on her ovaries. And so it causes those little follicles I talked about to mature, and those little follicles, as they mature, they start producing estrogen. So as those follicles mature, they produce estrogen. So not only the adrenals are producing estrogen, but the ovarian follicles producing estrogen. And as the level of estrogen goes up to the middle of the cycle, and an egg is released, gets mature, an egg is released, and the level of estrogen goes down. And then a little body is formed in its place, which is called a corpus luteum, and that produces progesterone. And it starts thickening the lining of the endometrium, which is the lining inside here. That the red stuff, right? As the process happens through the middle of the month, you get ovulation, and the corpus luteum starts producing progesterone. So progesterone, the green, goes up and it thickens the lining of the uterus. And when you get to the menstrual part, the lining of the uterus is shed. So there's blood and there's going to be cells, the lining cells of the endometrium. All of them are shed. And in a normal woman, that cycle is repeated hundreds and hundreds of times, unless she gets pregnant. Because what progesterone is doing is actually preparing the endometrial lining for a baby. And if there's no baby, then it's shed. But if the egg that is produced gets fertilized by a sperm, then it gets lodged, it attaches to the wall of the uterus, which is what is supposed to happen, and it continues to feed from there. The placenta attaches and continues to grow, etc., etc. So that's the only thing that is supposed to interrupt the menstrual cycle. And that process, as I said, goes on and on until after time all the follicles get exhausted. They don't all produce eggs, but eventually they just get exhausted. They stop being able to produce. And because they have stopped producing, your estrogen levels get low because they were responsible for most of the estrogen you have in your body. So every month, every time the pituitary hormone acts on them, your estrogen levels go up, your estrogen levels come down, they go back up, they come down, until all the follicles, as we say, get exhausted, they can no longer function, so estrogen level goes down. So what was estrogen doing for you? Well, one, it was preparing you to have a baby, right? It was thickening the lining of the uterus. But apart from that, estrogen is what actually, in the pubertal girl, the girl who's at puberty, is what actually causes the sexual characteristics to develop. So it's what grows her breast, it's what grows her hair, in the right places, and it's what causes her hips to broaden. Right? It's something else. Something is happening in the boy as well. Remember, you have the adrenal, then you have other glands. You have the testes, and they're doing that same job. But we have the adrenal glands and we have the ovaries, and so it's the ovaries that are responsible, in the most part, for the level of estrogen that we have. Let's get this. So I'm just going to tell you the things that estrogen can do. So it helps to, as I said, build up the uterine lining, and it helps with the secondary sexual characteristics. Go on, let me see what's the next slide I have. Right, so I had mentioned the two hormones. Go to the next slide. Right, so here are the functions. Development of the female reproductive tract, as I mentioned, took you through the cycle, development of the female characteristics, and the stimulation of the proliferative phase of the endometrium. So that's the word for the buildup of the endometrial lining. So I'll show you some pictures a little later, because one of the most common specimens that I get to see on a weekly basis are from the endometrium. Things can go wrong with women. They can have abnormal bleeding. And so what the doctor will do, what the gynecologist will do is put in a little suction thing into the uterus and pull out some of the endometrial and send it to the pathologist. So we will examine it and we will say endometrium is normal, or the endometrium is hyperplastic, or there's cancer, or this endometrium, if it was taken, how long is the menstrual cycle?
28
Average?
28 days.
28 days, right. So in the first 14, it's building up. We call it the proliferative phase. And then after the ovulation, we call it the secretory. So if let's say the gynecologist takes a sample on day 18, and it looks like it's proliferative, then we know that ovulation didn't take place. Then it means that something is wrong, something is affecting the woman's ovulation. Because we're supposed to, once ovulation has taken place, we're supposed to be able to date the endometrium. We're supposed to be able to say this is day 17, this is day 20, this is day 22, etc. Or this is menstrual endometrium. So there are things that are going to go wrong occasionally with the cycle that can interrupt the menstrual cycle. Or sometimes when we start getting to like 40 something, menopause is on the horizon waving, but we're not quite there. We will find that what I mentioned before, the corpus luteum, which occurs after ovulation, cannot support the lining of the endometrium as long as it should. And so we tend to get abnormal bleeding. So you can bleed any old time and it affects the cycle. But I want to talk about this because this is very important in what will happen in menopause, vasodilatation. So I'll come back to it. It protects, estrogen also protects the heart and it maintains the strength of the bones. Go to the next slide for me, please. So, when we talk about vasodilatation, that's what we're talking about. So, say this is a normal artery. An artery is a blood vessel. It's kind of like a pipe. It transmits blood from the heart to the organs. Arteries can constrict or they can dilate. Estrogen tends to have a dilating effect on the blood vessels. In other words, they make them wider. If you make a pipe wider, what's going to happen? It can carry more blood, right? And then there's less pressure. If the pipe gets tight, right? If you want to, how do you do it? When you have a hose, right? And you tighten that head, the water comes off under pressure. But if you open it, the water just flows gently. So, when we talk about the vasodilatory effects of estrogen, it helps to, in us women, sorry, not us, those people, she and hi, but not the, I suppose not me and you and one of the beneficial effects of estrogen is that it helps to reduce blood pressure. You can appreciate that if the pipe is looser, if the arteries are more open, then the heart doesn't have to force the blood through it as if it was tighter. So that's one of the benefits that estrogen gives to women. And that's why our blood pressure, ours, me and you, tends to go up too as we get older, because we lose that protective effect of estrogen, because all our follicles are tired, they're not working. So we lose that effect. Our blood vessels get tighter, they constrict, and our blood pressure goes up. So that's one of the things that tends to come with menopause. It doesn't have to happen. There are things you can do but it's almost like a natural consequence of menopause because you don't have that effect. And similarly, it's going to protect the heart because anything that makes blood flow easier is going to protect the heart because it's the heart that has to pump the blood through those vessels. So if you have vessels that are constricting, the smaller they get, the harder the heart has to work. And so for those of us who have reached menopause, we have lost that protective effect that estrogen gave to us, and our risk of heart attack becomes almost equal to that of men. Right? We know men have a higher risk of heart attack when they get to like their 40s, 50s. So once we like pass 50, that protective effect tends to go. Was the other one that I had mentioned? Right. Estrogen also increases HDL. You heard about HDL and LDL, good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. The bad one, LDL, is what causes plaque to build up in our coronary arteries. The good one is protective. So estrogen tends to increase the good one and lower the bad one. So when we lose our estrogen, our HDL levels go down or LDL levels go up, puts us at higher risk of heart attack. Also protects the brain, almost for the same reason. If blood flow to the brain is increased, then our brain function improves. There's a hormone called serotonin. Again, if you were constant listeners to Healing Moments, you'd have heard about serotonin a lot. Serotonin is a feel-good hormone. Some of it is produced in the brain, some of it is produced in the gut. But it's one of those hormones, and remember, hormones is like chemicals, right, that are produced. Our body runs on chemicals. As much as we don't want to believe it and we hate chemicals, every process in our body is run by chemicals because we have those chemicals inside of us. So serotonin is one of those hormones, which is a neurotransmitter, which makes us feel good. Estrogen promotes the synthesis or the production of serotonin. So the more estrogen we have, the more serotonin we're likely to have. And it also prevents the reuptake. We're not doing a neurotransmitter class now, but what neurotransmitters do is that they conduct messages, or they pass messages from one nerve cell to the next. Right. So if you have a large amount of neurotransmitter produced by one cell, it will have a massive effect on the next cell. But all of those neurotransmitters, eventually they disintegrate. So, and they're reuptaken by the cell that produced them. So what serotonin does, it slows down the reuptake. So you have more serotonin in the gap between your nerve cells, right? So that's a good effect. So if you losing, and so why I tied it into mental health, when your estrogen levels go down, your serotonin levels go down. So you have to kind of be doing other things to increase the serotonin. And serotonin affects mood, right? It's one of those chemicals that become depleted in people who suffer from depression, right? And doctors have to prescribe things that are going to slow down the reuptake of serotonin so that they feel better. So menopause comes with mood change. Estrogen also affects other parts of the brain, like the what we call the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus has to do with temperature control, right? When you have a fever, sometimes it knocks out your hypothalamus, so your body can't maintain the normal temperature, it goes high. So what do you think? How do you think that's related to what happens in menopause?
Hot flashes.
Yeah, right. So hot flashes come about from like two things. One, the well, yes, let's just keep it that way. One, yeah. So the hypothalamus is affected by estrogen. If your estrogen levels go down, your hypothalamus doesn't function as it should, and so you get hot flashes. Right? Your body actually thinks it's having a fever, and you start to sweat to kind of bring it down. Right? Your blood vessels dilate, you sweat, etc. Um, Estrogen also improves sex. So, how do you think? Blood vessels dilate. Dilatation of blood vessels is one of the things that happens when you get sexually aroused, which is why the tissues get swollen and produce juices, etc., etc. When women reach menopause, because of the loss of estrogen, there's dryness, right? There's vaginal dryness, and so, of course, that is going to more difficult, and so some women may tend to lose their libido around that time. So for the young ones, look out for the loss of libido. The other part of the brain that's affected by estrogen is called the amygdala. Next slide. I think that's the last picture. That's what the cells look like. They look like tired cells, right? They just look, everything, the cells look smaller. Estrogen helps the cells to, we call it mature. And when there's no estrogen, there's no maturity. So the cells just look small and tired, which can, bring, sometimes make us confuse it with a cancer. So let me see if I have all of the effects here. Right, so I know I have another slide. Right, estrogen, loss of estrogen also causes us to have trouble sleeping. So sometimes as we get older, we may find that we have trouble sleeping because estrogen also affects the brain stem. And if it doesn't activate the brain stem, then we have trouble sleeping. So we get hot flashes, we get mood swings, we get memory loss, we get dryness of our mucous membranes, and we also have trouble sleeping. So we're in trouble. Right. Another thing that loss of estrogen does is that it increases, what is the word for this? Belly fat. When we lose Simone, you're so blessed and lucky. But yes, when our estrogen levels go down, belly fat increases. It's one of those things. And when belly fat increases, then it puts us at risk for what we call metabolic syndrome. With our high blood pressure, our blood pressure going up and our belly fat increases, we're at risk for diabetes. Right? And that's one of the reasons diabetes also increases in older people, in obese people, in people who store a lot of belly fat. So I may look thin, but right. And so that puts us at risk. And so, is there a way to fix this? Because this is a God-given thing. There's menarche. There's follicle stimulating hormone. The follicles ripen. They release an egg. The corpus luteum produces progesterone. And the cycle goes on and on and on. But it doesn't go on forever, because God knows that at 60, we can't be running behind children. We're not supposed to have that strength to be chasing children. So when we get to like about 50, 51, some women start at 45, etc. Time check. 10 to 8. Okay. Some women start 45 and some go up to 60, which is kind of a real pain to be changing napkins at 60. But I'm kind of losing my train of thought. I got distracted. Right. Let's see. What was I going to say? All right. So, yes, I was on metabolic syndrome. Increase of belly fat, risk of diabetes, risk of high blood pressure. So what did we talk about? We say blood pressure increases, belly fat increases, mood swings increase, diabetes, risk of heart attack, bones get weak as well, right? Estrogen helps to maintain the integrity of the bones. And then we get dryness, and loss of libido, memory loss, trouble sleeping. There are lots of things that come with menopause. So what do we do? Because we can't stop it, can we? So can we fix menopause? How do you think we can fix menopause?
Replace estrogen.
Sorry?
Give estrogen.
Right. We can give estrogen. So some women, because they're so miserable when they have hot flashes, they go, and because of this, they suffer from vaginal dryness and they don't enjoy sex anymore. They go to the doctor and he provides them with what we call hormone replacement therapy. So the doctor gives them estrogen to take. That comes with risks because we're really not supposed to be under the influence of estrogen for that long. It's true there are problems that come with loss of estrogen, but hormone replacement therapy puts women at risk for endometrial cancer because you're stimulating something that's no longer supposed to be stimulated. And if something, right, that's supposed to be dead. And if you keep stimulating it, you have cells growing and cells dividing. The more cells growing and cells dividing you have, the higher risk of cancer. So it may make women feel good, but it puts them at risk for cancer. So what else can we do?
I have another question.
Sure. Oh, sorry. I thought it was like coming from behind me. Sorry.
How about women who have had a hysterectomy, which means there's no risk for proliferation of anything because there's no uterus, and giving those women hormone replacement therapy, is there increased risk for breast cancer as well, or?
Sorry, yes, there's an increased risk for breast cancer as well.
Oh, well, you can't help with them.
Estrogen also stimulates breast lobules as well. Breast lobules are supposed to atrophy as we get older, so it increases the risk. So sometimes women go into early menopause because they lose their uterus because of some surgery, fibroids. But what doctors do, if they're doing surgery on a woman, if they're removing the womb of a woman who is like 40, they will leave an ovary behind so that she will still be producing estrogen. She wouldn't be menstruating, but she will have estrogen. So yes, you can give estrogen replacement therapy. Until normal. Right. Okay. So I had already done the tying up with mental health, estrogen and serotonin, brain memory, decision making, pleasure. Even loss of estrogen can take away your pleasure. So we talked about that. I think the next one is how do we fix it? Yes. So should we fix menopause? Should we fight against nature? So we talked about hormone replacement therapy, and we said that it has risk. There are substances called phytoestrogens that we find in plants, right? There are foods that are going to decrease your estrogen levels, and there are foods that will increase your estrogen level. So the phytoestrogens are found in things like flaxseed, soybeans. I don't know how to pronounce that one. Edamame. It's like a bean, but it's kind of popular these days as a vegan food, and it's a source of phytoestrogen. And of course, fruits and nuts. Chocolate is supposed to be very good. Dark chocolate is supposed to be very good as a producer of phytoestrogen, and chickpeas.
That's
Sorry?
probably dark chocolate and not
Dark
milk chocolate.
Yes, dark chocolate.
No, it's not.
Chocolate is a plant, therefore it is a vegetable.
Chocolate is not a plant.
Oh, Mike.
Sorry. Good night, everyone.
Yeah.
So when we have those cravings, like just before your cycle begins or whatever, where you have to have something sweet, and most often for me, fortunately, it's always chocolate, and I always want the dark chocolate. That's what my thing is. Is that because of the need for increase in the estrogen during that
Did
time?
that happen all through your cycle, or it only started happening in your 40s?
No, I ain't get that
I'm
far
assuming
yet.
you're in your 40s.
Not yet, not yet. I ain't getting on there yet. Looking forward to it, but not yet.
Sorry.
Yes, please. Closer to retirement. Anyhow, that's a side note. I found that after, just before I had my daughter, I found that I had that need for this dark chocolate. It was so bad that I would go searching and literally drive wherever I have to go to get it. Because if it wasn't met, it would mean that my cycle was like, for some reason, would be more painful, or something will happen that makes it an even more unpleasant experience. But having the dark chocolate in particular, that seemed to like soothe, along with the painkillers, of course, to so I'm just asking if that's probably why we have such cravings.
Probably your hormone levels are not at the level they're supposed to be. You're probably having fluctuations when you shouldn't be, and maybe that's why you're craving the chocolate. Right. So I want you to notice though that everything, the cure for everything, goes back to what we always knew to be right. Goes back again to diet. If we're eating the right things, right? And there are things that probably we didn't know before, like we didn't know flaxseed. Well, I didn't know flaxseed. But, it's kind of a newish thing in my life. But I tend to use a lot of it if I'm doing like shakes and smoothies, etc. Very good for smoothies. And you can get them already ground in the supermarket. Or you can get them in whole, if you wish. Chickpeas, which I suppose we don't grow, but are available, are very good sources of phytoestrogen. So if we eat more of those things than we used to, right? They say that wine cuts down on your estrogen levels, which is fine, because, we're not into wine, or as Paul says, we're not given too much wine, hopefully, right? So we don't have that problem. If we're eating right, but there's what do you call it? There's a caveat to the eating fruits and vegetables, because there are certain vegetables which will decrease your estrogen levels. So especially in menopause, you probably shouldn't eat too much of them. So the cruciferous vegetables, which are very good for other things, so the cabbage and the broccoli those are not so healthy in phytoestrogen. Doesn't mean you shouldn't eat them, but you should probably not. You should probably have a balance where they're lower than your fruits and nuts. And then there's exercise. What does exercise do for serotonin? It increases serotonin levels. So increase your level of pleasurable activities, because your loss of estrogen is decreasing your ability to have pleasure. So as Sarah said, to have pleasure. So find other things that are going to increase your serotonin level. So sleep increases your serotonin level. So even though you may have difficulty falling asleep, if you can, as it was you that was talking about having like fixed bedtimes, if you try to do your sleep on a schedule where you have fixed bedtime, it will increase your efficiency of your sleep and will help your serotonin levels. Exercise increases serotonin levels. So again, it goes back to what we knew: diet, exercise, rest, etc., and trust in God. We can never discount what believing God, because Sarah believed God and she had a baby past childbearing age. We may not want a baby, but what we may desire is a better life, a happier life. So increase your interactions with people who make you feel good. Go fishing with the women's ministry. Go fishing with the women's ministry. Women's ministry has invited us to go fishing on Saturday night. So do things like that. Come out to socials. Come out where your friends are. Increase interactions with people that you love. Do pleasurable things. All those can help to counteract the effects of menopause. Right? And, yeah.
Question. We mentioned earlier about hormone replacement therapy and its negative effects in menopausal women. What is the level of effects of phytoestrogens on the uterus that is dead or exhausted? Is that in any way going to have negative effects on menopausal women? Because you've heard some things flying around that the phytoestrogens, you really probably shouldn't use them so much, especially women who are menopausal, etc. Is it that these phytoestrogens help the process in terms of the negative side effects of menopause, or do they do both and therefore they should still be a cautious approach?
Well, there is information going around that soybeans cause ovarian cancers or endometrial cancers in women. So the thing though with diet and exercise and anything is balance, is that you shouldn't eat too much. So you shouldn't say, okay, I'm going to just eat soybeans every day because it's going to make me feel good and it's going to... Remember, in everything there is balance. But anything that you tend to get naturally through food, the body has a way of handling it much more effectively than if you have an external hormone effect. Right. Because when people are on hormones, we can also see the effects in the endometrial samples. Yes, when people are on hormones, the endometrium has a different look as well. So we can ask, is this person on hormone therapy? Yes. So, but it's very unlikely that eating foods that stimulate estrogen production are going to have the same effect as if you're putting in drugs. Because we know how to manipulate the chemicals in the body, but there are always other unwanted effects that we don't know. So for example, we know how to manipulate serotonin. So we will give you drugs that will prevent serotonin reuptake. But we expect that the serotonin is only going to act on a particular kind of receptor. But there are other receptors around that serotonin is going to act on. So while we're treating depression, we are giving people diarrhea, for example. Okay? That's what drugs. Oh, sorry. As you have one.
When you are at the stage of childbearing, and sometimes you saw the cycle as a nuisance, but when you get either to the plateau or the valley, then you realize the significance of the estrogen. It plays a very important part in our bodies, which, back then you didn't really know. But when you get to that stage now, then you really appreciate the importance that estrogen played in your life.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. we enjoy the freedom of no longer having to, to pad up. Um, but but it comes with consequences. It comes with a price. All right.
Question again. Why are women who are past menopause age not given pap smears after a certain age of having normal smears?
Okay. So the recommendation for pap smears varies in different countries. I think in the US they're now starting at 21. Around here we start at 18, or we say once you're sexually active. And after 65, we tend to, well, one is the atrophy problem, because the cells, they're going to be small compared to the size of the nucleus. And we're more likely to make, to have false negatives that way. Also, it takes about 5 to 10 years for the HPV virus to cause the changes in the cells that cause cancer. So if a woman has been having negative pap smears all her life, after 65, we figure, her lifespan is probably going to be around 80, and I figure, yeah, the risk is lower. You hardly find, one of the risks of cervical cancer is multiple partners, right? You hardly find a woman after 65.
It's very painful. Yes, it is.
All right. So I
Thank you.
I can't tell you no, because everybody's experience is different. It's a speculum. It, opens up the, and this is not. Although the speculum may not be as big as other things that may go into your vagina, but it's a different time. It's a different feeling, and it's uncomfortable. But if you say it's painful, it is. There are some women whose the opening of the cervix closes very tight after menopause, and so to insert that brush can cause pain. Yes. So if you say it's painful, I'll agree.
Use the mic. Use the mic.
Oh, sorry, your mic. Right. Yes.
You're not going to have your regular pap smear. Should you still go to your obstetric gynecologist and get your regular checkups?
Yeah, you should still get examinations. Yeah, you just never know. They can maybe see something, feel something that shouldn't be there, etc. So it's still good to have regular checkups, even if you're not having pap smears. But for us who are not yet past 70 or not way past 65, we should still continue to have a regular pap smear. At least they're not saying every year anymore, unless you've had an abnormal. They're going like up to 3 years. So if you're having one in 3 years, that's good enough.
How long does menopause last? Meaning, sorry. How long does the process of cessation of the menstrual cycle and the major things,
symptoms?
symptoms?
Like everything else in medicine, whatever happens in our body doesn't necessarily read what they write in the books. So it's different for different people. It can stretch out. You may find that you're still ovulating, but you're not producing an egg every month. So it's almost like when girls first start having their period, it may not be regular. The same thing happens when you're nearing the end. You kind of get it stretched out like every 3 months, and then all of a sudden, when you think it's done, it comes back, that kind of thing. It can stretch out for maybe a number of years, or even stress can just cause you to have a menstrual period, etc. But women, a woman once came to me in clinic and said she was getting young again. And she seemed excited that she was now bleeding again. And she thought it was a good thing. But it's actually a bad thing. If people and I keep referring to me because I don't know people's age, but if people at my age, if I start bleeding again, I'm going to the doctor the same day, because there's nothing called being young again. That is a disease, that is a problem, and it may be the first sign of cancer, right? Anything, anywhere blood is coming from that's not supposed to be coming from, could be a sign of cancer. Trouble, so check it out. Okay, any other questions, or we're happy? Sorry? No, it doesn't have to relate to menopause.
A lot of what you said, you refer to the endometrium or something like that. There's endometriosis. What causes that? And then there's also PCOS. Right. So if you can just speak a little bit of that, because what I've found in recent years, a lot of girls seem to have extremely bad periods where they just can't function maybe on day one or something. And I just want to know what causes that.
I sometimes wonder if there are environmental conditions or dietary conditions that are causing all of these changes. Because endometriosis is, I don't know if it's becoming common or if it is diagnosed more because people are more aware of it. But there are several theories as to what causes endometriosis. There is the backflow theory, where it is believed that a woman may be menstruating, and instead of all the blood coming that way through her vagina, some of it goes back through the fallopian tubes and gets out into the pelvic cavity and gets deposited there, and then it goes through a cycle all on its own. And there is a theory that says that when during embryological development, when the embryo was developing and when all the organs were forming, there were some endometrial tissue grew where it wasn't supposed to grow. So for example, some women get severe headaches every time they get their period, and it's actually believed that they may have a focus of endometrium there, which is going through the normal cycle and bleeding. Some of them have nosebleeds because they have endometrial tissue in the upper nasal cavity. Some cough blood because they have endometrial tissue in their lungs. So just believe that it's just one of those abnormalities where the tissue grew where it wasn't supposed to grow. And some women, after they have surgery, endometrial tissue gets trapped in the cut. So they actually get bleeding from the cut every time they have a period. And it can cause severe pain. The deposits, especially that are in the pelvis, can cause a lot of pain to women. The PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So instead of having like your normal follicles that mature and thing, you have like an excess of follicles, and they all kind of ring the uterus, and they become like little cysts, and they're not really functioning as they should. And so most of those women, they don't menstruate at all, and they can be infertile. And that's kind of pretty common too these days.
I recall like we were traveling in a group, and this child, she was like on her first day, I mean the child vomit and she roll up, and she just could not do anything. And You don't know what to do. There just seems to be nothing that you can do about it. And that is the type of reaction I've been seeing in young girls. Like they just can't function at all. And
They have to be treated so they can either, one of the things that is advised is that they start taking painkillers like before the period, or the doctor goes in and puts in a scope, hysteroscopy, and burns out those foci of endometriosis. And hopefully that will help. But there are places where you cannot burn them. You can't go in the lungs and burn them. Yes.
Just a comment on what Sister Marcel was saying. Endometrial pain is more associated with secondary dysmenorrhea. So you find that there's regular period pain, which usually lasts for the first 2 days or so of the cycle. But if you find that your child or you having pain for your entire cycle, that is something to get checked out.
Yes.
Because it's not something that is considered normal.
And sometimes it's an anatomical problem, because I had a friend who, she said when she was young, she was having severe period pains. And then when they did an ultrasound, they found out that she had a double womb. So it was forming. It was so like there's the normal one, because she actually hasn't, there's one to the side. And the blood from that one couldn't get out because, it was blocked. So that was causing all the pain. So sometimes, we shouldn't take things for granted. You should have a check, because it could be something like that.
There's also the school of thought that if a young lady has a baby, that after the first child, that that pain ceases, but that does not happen in every person.
Doesn't happen in everybody. Yeah. Sometimes you hear women say, the doctor told me go have a child, and I will get relief from pain. Doesn't happen in everybody. For some people it works. Right. So we have to end because it's kind of late. But I'll take your question. Does anybody want their blood sugar checked? Because we didn't get to do it before. But if you do you wanted your blood sugar checked? Or you wouldn't bother? Okay. If you really do think you want to get it checked, Sister Rachel will do it for you. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry. Give Elder Walden my phone. Sure. And we're happy. I didn't even welcome you. Welcome, and Brother Egad as well. Welcome to the men who came out.
I remember as a teenager growing up. Well, I grew up with a lot of sisters and female cousins and so on. The older folk used to pull the girls close.
Aside, yeah.
And they will educate them about having your periods and so on, what to expect. When you reach a certain age, rather than being go to school and being surprised that something is happening to you and you don't know what to do, or you're ashamed, you don't want to ask a question.
Your mic is on, I'm not hearing
Yeah, mic on. Is that type of thing still happening today, where parents take time out to educate their young girls as to what is going to happen to their bodies at a later age? If that is not happening,
have to ask those who have girls. I don't have girls. Yeah. Never had a chance to do that.
Because I believe that can help with a lot of the issues that we have with young people, being surprised when they have their periods and so.
And I think that sometimes some of us come to expect the pain. So we have pain, but our pain tolerance may be different. And so we may see somebody screaming and falling on the ground, and we may think that that's probably what they're experiencing, not realizing that what they're experiencing is 10 times worse than. So sometimes it's expectations. Um, but as Sister Waith was saying, it's taught in school. Sister Rachel was saying, yes, you take the time off to talk
Yeah,
to.
I spoke to my daughter beforehand. It still was a surprise for her, but at the end of the day, you prepare as much as you can, and then after that, you gotta have that relationship with your child that you're able to talk to them, that they can come to you and talk to you about anything, and not feel uncomfortable. Because from the beginning, I told her the best information that you can get is from me. If I don't know, I know where to get that information for you.
Okay.
Do not depend on your peers and all the stuff that you see in social media, because there's a lot of misinformation out there that is going to lead you down a different path that you don't want to go. And so I believe that that's something we need to instill in our children from early, before they even reach the stage of puberty, that they get comfortable talking to you, so that when things happen, they aren't insecure, and they aren't out there like a fish out of water.
Okay.
One other question.
Yes.
Out of all of this that we would have heard tonight, I would hasten to conclude that we as adults who have the information should have forums with the church to help, not necessarily young people.
You mean in
but-
the day, because we wouldn't get them in the night.
Yeah, to help
In the
help
day.
everybody to, to be more au fait with what is happening to their bodies, what may be happening to their children, what may be happening to your friend, because close friends share things that normally share with other people, right? So I think that we need to come to a place where I'm sure that we're having issues in the church in regards to sexuality and all this stuff. I think it is time that we, put aside some time, yeah, some church service that we look forward to, and start to educate our people, our children, and our peers as to the things that are important that they will have to confront at some time or the other. And sometimes when men come and sit in these forums, they're always saying that they're glad that they're not a woman. I'm not going to say that. I've been around women all my life, so I can understand stuff. I've seen it. Married for lost count now, over 40-something years.
Right.
So I know
Married
what I'm talking
once,
about.
right?
Yeah, only once. I don't do like the what the Adventist pastors do when they're presenting people on the roster, married to.
Oh, married one wife.
Married one.
Married to one wife.
I just
Yeah.
hear that.
Yes, married to one wife. Okay, so
Can I ask-
sorry, go on.
Can I ask
I
a
just
question?
want to can I just put in the plug for tomorrow night? I know that Thursday night usually the rest night when we want to do things, but we're giving the rest on Friday, so so you can be home. I kind of want to have an idea if any children or parents will be coming out tomorrow night, because I don't want to invite the pediatrician and then, since this is her first time here, and I'm hoping, usually, what we're doing is making connections with the community, and I don't want her to come and see that it's at least, if we have this section full. She's not going to be using visual aids because she's a free spirit. She talks, she's that kind of person, so she will have conversations with us. I just want to put in the plug for tomorrow night. Go on, Pat.
What I wanted to ask is, when you're having a period, especially young children, and well, your parents tell you everything about a period, but then you have to experience it for
For
yourself.
yourself, yeah.
And then you see like clots, you get real scared. And I think that we need to like educate the young children when they see clots. Why would I see a clot, and what do I do when I see a clot? Right? And so maybe not a question, but that's
Okay.
a good.
Yeah, good point. Ask the nurse what happens when you see a clot.
And my last question.
Yes. Nurse, what causes a cystic clot? I don't. No, it's okay. I don't want to put you under the gosh. It's okay. I don't want to put you under pressure.
What advice would you give to partners of women who are going through menopause, in terms of a support system and in terms of the sexual aspect of the relationship, because that is going to be impacted and will probably change?
Yes, good point. Right. So on that note, I just wanted you to know that Janice is a nurse and Mark Yearwood is also a nurse. So we're getting more health people in the church, right? So don't be afraid to like use them, ask them questions, let them do presentations to the children, etc. Use them. Right. So it's good that there are some men here, and it's good that men are educated about because they may find that they're getting difficulty in sex, not just sometimes because the woman doesn't want to go through the difficulties. Not that she doesn't want to please the man, but it's becoming hard for her. It's becoming dry, it's not lubricating. So if a man knows he can be more gentle, he can get, lube, KY jelly, etc., things that would help to reduce the friction, right? Because friction can cause bleeding, the tissues get more fragile. We call that atrophy of the vaginal mucosa. Because the cells changing character, they're not as protective as they should be when they mature. So the tissue breaks down very easily and she can bleed. So it's good to be aware, to support her through knowing that sex is going to change probably forever. Not that it will stop, but things will probably have to be done a little differently. More support, slower, take your time, lubricate, etc., etc. Do other things, invent. Invent. I leave that up to your imagination. Chris is yawning. We just have to thank Chris so much for his service. Thank you so much, Chris, for always being here with us. No matter how many of us are here, you're here. Right, and support through the hot flashes, etc., etc. Why would she want the fan on? You don't like fan, but she's hot, right?
So for me personally, where my husband is concerned, he has been talking about getting a motorbike, those ninja bikes.
Getting
Some of them
what?
ninja bikes, those little fast things that they like. So when they hit menopause, he can have that so that I can get my break. I am not talking to anybody. You go right in and leave me alone. A motorcycle. So most men be like, I going through my midlife crisis. Well, I will gift him a motorcycle and he can go and I can go through my menopause quite comfortably.
I just like you to know that I do not endorse that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much. It's good to have an audience when you're talking. I thank you for being a patient audience, a very attentive audience, an interactive audience. I think I've heard every voice there except I didn't hear your voice. Right, but everybody has been so attentive and it's been a pleasure. I love teaching. It's second nature to me. It's what I done all my life. So let's stand and I had prayer at the beginning. Patrick likes to pray, so the mic and here you are, sir.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to come together, to share, to be educated, to be edified. and even, Lord, to understand better how we function. I'm happy that you have, what word should I use? That you have given somebody the ability to be able to help us to understand the various issues that we have as women and as men as we get older. Lord, you said to us that our bodies are wonderfully and fearfully made. And that says to me that you know everything that happens to us, and that if there's any correction, only you can correct it. So, Lord, we give you ourselves tonight. We give you our bodies, our brains. We give you our thinking. We give everything to you. And we ask, Lord, that as we surrender to you, that you will work out your good will in our lives. Yes, there will be challenges. There will be difficult times. But as the song says, through it all, help us to learn to trust in Jesus. And even as we leave here tonight, we leave here with the understanding that we have learned something that we can take with us. And perhaps at some time we will share it with someone so that they too will be educated to know more about their own bodies. With the men and women in a very special way. Yes, women have it seems to me as if women have more challenges than men. But I believe that when two people work together, whether the challenges are great or whether they are small, that they tend to work them out as a team. And so, dear God, bless us with the abilities to love our spouses, to love our church members, to be interested in individuals so that we can tell them that God truly loves us. Into your hands, I commit our lives. Take us home safely now. May we have a good night's rest and prepare for tomorrow as we invite somebody to bring their children so that they can learn more about God's will for their lives. So into your hands, we commit everything that transpired after this moment. In Jesus' name, amen.
Promise. Sorry. Yeah, I promise you tomorrow night it won't be as long. I told you after 45 minutes and 15 minutes more answers. So if we do have a time, we're able to start by 7:15. We should be at 8:15. We should be out of here. Yeah. Well, if it's interesting, people will stay on until the last subject. Normal Wednesday night. That's